is one of the founding members of our fellowship. When I first started attending, I think Emmett must have been about 1 or 2, so it's been 7 or 8 years. Ron was one of the first people to welcome me in and to teach me about what Unitarianism is. And so I can think of no one better to share with us what the thoughts were at the very beginning, the inception of this little group. So please lend him your ears and open up your hearts. Thank you, Ron.
Thank you, Jules. Great to see all of you. We've tuned into some of the virtual services the last few months, but we still miss being in your presence. Feel like the prodigal son come back to atone for his sins. But I definitely feel qualified to talk about the origins of Shared UU. I'm probably the wrong person to talk about vision. The closest I've really come to any feeling of destiny is what I would call blind vision, if you pardon the oxymoron. Blind vision invades the imagination without any form or path to fruition. I believe it played a role in our decision to start the UU group. And it's fitting that I have Linda, even though she's moved out of the camera, by my side here because it was a joint effort. I went to first grade in a small community founded by and populated by Mormons. There was only one classmate that was not a member of the church. And we weren't really mean to him, but we never went out of our way to befriend him either. He was an enigma to those of us who had been sheltered by Mormon doctrine from birth. And as you know, it's human nature to fear what we don't understand. But a part of me felt sorry for this little boy who was an outsider, and I felt guilty for avoiding him. Instead of doing something about those feelings, I merely fantasized a world where everyone went to the same community church, organized around where you live, not what you believe. So I guess that was my first blind vision. My sense of mission has been equally nebulous. At age 19, I embarked on a Mormon mission with no idea what to expect. I only knew that I was spiritually destitute. I wasn't sure whether Mormonism was the solution or the problem, but I suspected that immersing myself in it for 2 years would answer that question. And it did. The missionary regimen included a daily dose of prayer, proselytism, and study. And we read, I think, literally tons of books approved by the church. On the sly, I also read a book that I just picked up in a Chilean bookstore out of curiosity, having no inkling that it would one day be voted the second best nonfiction book of the 20th century. The title is The Varieties of Religious Experience by William James. He was celebrated as the father of American psychology, and as such, he honored the subjective truth embedded in a person's experience of the divine. But as an eminent philosopher, he didn't mistake this for objective truth. Indeed, to have done so for one belief system would have negated all others. And James was nothing if not fair-minded. I don't want to get hung up on philosophy, but I need to define the terms. By subjective truth, I mean that the experience is real, but the interpretation of it may be shaped by our religious or cultural context. For objective truth, not only is the experience real, but the interpretation of it can be verified by others through impartial inquiry. As a pragmatist, James also identified a third category, what he called truth in the making, whereby religious experience stimulates moral behavior. He offered ample evidence of this principle from his practice, but I have never been convinced of its universality. Nonetheless, this book was a turning point in my life. James's recognition of an unseen reality and his firsthand research into the authenticity of religious experience gave me permission to respect devout believers without having to necessarily agree with their beliefs. What's more, his contention that humans have differing aptitudes for religious experience relieved the existential guilt that I felt from questioning the most sacred underpinnings of my Mormon heritage. Well, during this same period, while I was on a mission, my girlfriend and future wife, Linda, joined the Campus Crusade for Christ at Colorado State University. She was turned off by the inward obsession with one's personal relationship with Jesus, and also the notion that the minutiae of one's existence would be manipulated by a capricious God. So both of us had become disillusioned with orthodoxy. When I got home from my mission, I still didn't have a plan. I chose to study physics, not because I envisioned a career in physics, but for the sheer joy of learning physics. Making a living from what I had learned was a happy accident, the product of incremental decisions rather than a master plan. Marriage was similar. Linda faithfully held on to this tenuous vision against all evidence, while I've struggled to find my place in the world. So it was with parenthood. While Linda knew from an early age that she wanted children, I was a reluctant father who only warmed up to the idea after I met our newborn daughter. Well, mostly for our children's growth, we started attending Foothills Unitarian in Fort Collins, Colorado. We were enthralled by the Reverend Roy Jones, a gifted orator and disciplined thinker who later spearheaded the upgrade of the Unitarian Universalist Association's Statement of Principles and Purposes. When we moved to Wyoming in 1978, we missed that connection. 5 years later, it was blind vision that prompted me to write a letter to the Sheridan Press. This letter included a confession of agnosticism and a plea for like-minded souls to join us in a uniquely Unitarian Universalist exploration. Our reaching out was an act of faith more than foresight. It felt more like tossing a fishing line in the stream with no bait, hoping that somehow we might get a bite. Those were the years of Ronald Reagan and the emergence of the Christian right. You know, all the folks that we had met in Sheridan were believers of one stripe or another. My closest friend was a lay minister in the Baptist church and a forceful witness for his evangelical faith. So Linda and I were torn between alienating our friends on one hand and offering a more liberal religious framework for our children on the other. And they had begun to question us and be questioned by their peers regarding religious beliefs. Well, an opinion editorial in the Billings Gazette put an end to our ambivalence. It was written by Dana Kopp, a medical doctor in the mold of Albert Schweitzer, and a member of the Billings UU Fellowship. His article enumerated the charges leveled against secular humanists who were particularly maligned in those days. Dr. Kopp then pled guilty to every charge. His courage jolted my conscience. Linda and I agreed that it was time to act, hence the letter. And to our surprise, we got several bites. So the Sheridan UU Fellowship began as a small group of free-thinking adults and their children, gathering in our home every other Sunday to console and challenge each other.
Okay, Charlie, will you get that and I'll call them back?
That's the phone, Charlie. As we grew in numbers, we rotated the meeting venue from house to house, and within a decade, we began to use public meeting places like MDU, Sheridan College, and the Masonic Lodge. With the energy of Michelle Lagore and others, religious education became a mainstay for our youth. When we reached the minimum membership of 30 adults, we formally affiliated with the UUA and adopted the necessary structure. And I attribute this largely to Victor Asher's vision. By then, so many members had stepped up to share the load that I could not begin to name them all. But I'll offer some examples of people who really committed themselves to the vitality and growth of the fellowship. Lonnie and Ginny, they were part of that founding group. Janet and Victor, Jolene and Bruce, Michelle and Bill, Sally and Ted, Stacy and Roger, Janelle and Phil, Helene and Chuck, Chris and Bill, Lorna and George, Jerry Kresge. I counted nearly 20 young people who grew up in the fellowship and a comparable number of members who have passed on. I dare say that in our 37-year history, Sheridan UU has touched hundreds. Among its leaders, Chuck Graves was the consummate visionary. He should be giving this talk. Chuck died, I'm not sure, 6 or 8 years ago. But his vision was evident in his law practice when he defended the University of Wyoming's black 14 football players in a racially and religiously charged court case that drew national attention. His clear vision was manifest when he dubbed us the little fellowship that could, and prodded us into acquiring our own meeting house. Chuck even coaxed UUA President Peter Morales to travel to Sheridan and dedicate our fellowship hall. In a speech that packed the house, Reverend Morales quipped, "Chuck Graves will not take no for an answer." That day in June of 2010 may have marked the coming of age for Sheridan UU. As if to sum up our reason for being, Reverend Morales offered his own vision of the role of UU in contemporary America, the role that it could play. He cited people who are driven away by fundamentalism that ask them to believe in creationism and miracles. He mentioned others that find no room in traditional religion for serious doubt. He lamented that, quote, "millions of Americans have been banished, driven out, rejected by the religious communities in which they were raised. When they could no longer utter the words of a creed, they left the church behind, and many of them left all religion behind," end quote. He also spoke of a growing number of people who had left a church, then raised their children with no religious affiliation. This younger generation comes to UU, quote, "wondering if there is something more than a life spent pursuing secular success," end quote. He suggested belief is overrated and unreliable. Referring to the Pope's acceptance of the reality of evolution, he said, one can be a Catholic today and believe what a Catholic would have been tried and punished for a few hundred years ago. He called belief the enemy of religion that too often stands in the way of love and kindness. His message culminated with a challenge. He said, we want a place where we can come together to remind ourselves of what is truly worthwhile. That is what worship is. It is literally an affirmation of worth. Citing James Carse, he said, what we need instead of creeds is a higher ignorance. Religion should help us move to an awareness that we do not know everything, to a place of profound humility and curiosity. Some of you may recently have encountered the term aspirational faith, which embodies an ideal without claiming absolute truth. Agnes Callard, philosophy professor at the University of Chicago, wrote, what keeps aspirational faith honest is its provisional character, the aspirant's recognition that she still has a long way to go. Well, our civilization has a long way to go. Franz Kafka said, the meaning of life is that it stops. A few years ago, Linda and I began to seriously ponder the end of our journey. And we answered yet another blind vision, left the beauty of Sheridan, the comfort of our friends, and the solidarity of this UU community to squeeze one more new experience out of our brief existence. We had no clue what would happen, but the move has enriched our perspective and has rewarded us with renewed purpose. Of course, it hasn't diminished in any way our 38 years in Sheridan. We cherish those years, the lifelong friends we made, and the opportunity to participate in an intentional community like the UU Fellowship. Thanks to all of you, no less than your predecessors, the enterprise lives on. As to its source, who is to say where a river begins? It has countless headwaters and tributaries that contribute to its gathering momentum. Linda and I may have occupied the furthest upstream point, but our influence was a mere trickle compared to all who joined us along the way. Without them, our little stream would have quickly dried up. We all need each other to make sure our blood, sweat, and tears will eventually reach that great sea we call posterity. Perhaps the biggest challenge to any new institution is to outlast the generation of its founders. I commend both the older and the younger leaders who continue to carry the UU Fellowship into the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ron. Linda, our hymn is Blue Boat Home, one of Janet's favorites, and also quickly adjusted post results.
I feel no motion, standing on these mountains and plains, far away from the rolling ocean. Still my dry land heart can say, I've been sailing all my life now, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and and the earth is my blue. Oh, no. Sun, my sail, and moon, my rudder, as I ply the starry sea, leaning over the edge in wonder, casting questions into.
On our website, you can find a link to Tithely, or you can also send a check to Ramona Stein, our treasurer. Her address is in the email that Victor sent, 1590 Sugarland Drive, number B-206, Sheridan, Wyoming. So if you'll all join me in blessing the offering. Let this be an offering to sustain and strengthen this place,
which is so sacred to many of us.
A community of
Memory and hope.
We are the keepers
of the dream.
Thanks, you guys. All right. Our closing words I think are pretty apt. They're from Gil Rendell. Leaders keep the conversation alive in the congregation, allowing the vision to be shaped by past history, current practice, and future opportunities. So at this time, I'd like to open up the conversation. So feel free to address all of your thoughts to Ron, Linda, all the other wonderful members that we have that started our.
I wanted to thank you, Ron. Sorry if I'm talking over anyone. I can't see the whole screen. You and Linda and Victor and Janet, Chuck Graves, who I never met. We owe such a great debt to you guys, to hanging in there, meeting in homes, sticking it out week after week, making the coffee for 20 years, Victor. I mean, without you guys, we would not have this home. And I am eternally grateful for this spiritual home. And I really appreciated, Ron, having grown up a staunch Catholic in a town with a lot of staunch Mormons. One of my good friends from high school went on his mission to Chile also. He did not get disillusioned and now has 10 children and his first grandbaby, and he's 52. So he has been a good Mormon. But I always appreciate hearing about your personal spiritual journey from the LDS faith, because it's one that, while it's very familiar to me, it's not one that I hear, like Catholics who've left are really common. I don't hear and run into that many people who are open about putting their LDS faith behind them.
First off, it's good to see you again. The two of you have been part of our lives and continue to be. Real quickly, we were members of the Presbyterian Church at a time in which they did not believe that homosexual people could possibly continue in the church. And so we left. And about that time, or a while after that, having attended a number of churches, you guys formed UU Fellowship, and we found our home. In regard to vision and knowing and learning, these are some of the thoughts that I've had as a result of your talk. And one is that the more I know I don't know. Each day, the work begins anew, because while I was sleeping, things changed. Some have, not everything, but enough that you have to continue the work if the work is to be carried forward. The goal isn't perfection. There isn't necessarily a goal, except that hopefully we can contribute to a better life for others as well as for ourselves.
Thank you, Bruce.
So I also just want to thank Ron for his talk today, and thank all of you. Really, and as many have said, this fellowship is, I think, just such an important part of our lives. When I moved home 13 over years ago, I didn't know if Wyoming could be my home again, but you all made it my home. And with, my dad brought me to you, and he had been a member for several years before I moved home. So it was really special to attend the fellowship with him, and to know that all of you were there for me after he left. So thank you for that as well. And I think we have a lot more vision than we think we do. And maybe it's more collective and not always spoken out loud, but it's there, and I think it's there in our hearts and how we all come together with each other. So thank you.
Thank you, Shannon.
I used to have a little, I don't know, journal thing, and it had random quotes on every other page or something. And one page that I actually tore the page out, and I had it for a number of years, said, sometimes your only mode of transportation is a leap of faith. So I've always loved that, and I like that for this presentation too, just because I'm really glad you threw out your baitless line and gathered us all together. You may as well cast like a mesh net or something for as many people as it's brought in. So, and well written, well said. Thank you.
Yeah, just jumping on that, following up on what you said, Jules. Yes, I too am very grateful for your letter, and I'm very grateful for your friendship. I don't know where I would be in terms of my faith and my having a community without you, you guys, Ron and Linda. I just, it was so, that your letter and that opportunity came at such an important time in Janet and my life, just like you were concerned about having something for your kids to participate in. That's where we started, but I realized that I needed the community, this community, as much as my kids might have. I think, Ron, I also want to say I appreciate what you said about that book by William James, and the idea that people can have an experience of a transcendental experience, if we, whatever we want to call it, a religious experience that is very real to them, but that doesn't make it objective, and that people can have different experiences, but that we don't have to be divided by that. We can be in a community that acknowledges those experiences, however different they might be, and say, well, where is the objectivity versus the subjectivity? That is such, William James was so helpful, I think. And of course, that book came to you at the right time. And I think that perspective is so useful to you. And I think that the talk that Morales gave us just kind of built on that idea, didn't it? So it was so nice of you to connect those pieces together for us. I do hope that you publish those words on our website. I think they would be a very welcome addition. So please don't throw your notes away. And thanks for, I wanted to also say that I think you're far too humble in your expression of a lack of mission and vision. I would attribute a lot of our group's mission and vision to your founding ideas. So you might want to rethink what you were saying about those things. Anyway, thanks very much for the talk this morning.
Well, that's very kind of you, Victor. It's just moving for us just to see what has been wrought by those years of struggle, but I think we flourished from early on, and enjoyed all of our meetings, even when it was just 5 or 6 individuals. But I know I'm not convinced that I ever knew that it was going to happen like this. It just
Well,
like
and
someone said, it's kind of a collective vision, is a collective asset, and we somehow attracted a lot of visionary people.
I know for me, your long dear friendship has been so important to our family's lives, and it certainly guided me when we moved away from Sheridan in 1986 for 4 years, and we moved to Asheville, North Carolina. I really don't know what I would have done had there not been a Unitarian church there to find some like-minded spirits in that, at the time, rather challenging community. And then when we came back, we were invested in a new and more mature way, perhaps, in terms of our participation in the fellowship. But I think what I learned was that one of the things I wanted to do in my life was to make sure I was supporting the existence of a liberal faith community in this or wherever we happen to be, because I knew how important it was to us to find it, and then to find it again in Asheville, and how different it would have been without that as a resource. So, and I've never asked Michelle and Bill that question. I know it was important for their raising their kids too, and many others of you, of course. But that was the life lesson for me, is that if you have to commit to something, this is something I can really hang on to and stay with. I want this community to exist for our own benefit and the benefits of those to come.
Yeah, and it's a good point that I've often thought about. The economists have a word called existence value, that they apply to things that we don't experience directly, but we like the fact that they're there. And I think we've served that purpose in Sheridan, even for people who haven't come or haven't come regularly.
Yes.
So Ron, this is Bill. I really enjoyed hearing what you had to say today. You've got such a great perspective on the fellowship, right? And just in terms of leadership and vision, what I think is really cool about your story and the story of this fellowship is you saw a need, and it was a personal need, but you saw a need and you moved forward to fill that need and to do something about it. So you essentially created something from nothing. You cast that baitless hook out into the water, not knowing what was going to happen. To me, that's a leap of faith, but it's visionary. And as people started responding and you got nibbles on that baitless hook, I think your leadership skills probably kicked in, and you realize it's not just me. I mean, I had the idea, but you worked with other people to actually give it form and shape and substance. I think that's a wonderful thing, and not everybody can lay claim to those sorts of successes. And I think it's a really cool thing. And obviously, so many of us now have benefited from your leap of faith of casting that baitless hook into the water. I really appreciated one of your last remarks that touched on the idea of that, the real challenge now is for the fellowship to persist beyond the first generation. And I think that's true. We've recognized that for quite a while, and looking at the faces on here, I think there's a good foundation and a good start to do just that. It's a challenge faced by a lot of volunteer organizations these days, and it's simply a function of demographics, right? The aging of American society. But your talk was just spot on, and I certainly appreciate it, Ron. So thank you.
Can I jump in too? We have the floor. I just want to say, Ron, how much I appreciated your talk today. It was a great message for these times. I've always thought you and Linda both embody humility. Other people have commented on it, that encourages other people, that brings out the best in all of us. So like, you're this really great catalyst. People around you respect you. And just the fact that we had record attendance today,
Yes.
attendance since the COVID thing, speaks volumes to how we hold you in our hearts.
I'd like to suggest a different metaphor than a baited or unbaited hook. I can't see this coming out of a fishing pole, but I feel like what was thrown into the stream of life was a knotted rope, and people had a choice to climb up that rope to a better place rather than getting hooked by anything. We had a choice to join rather than getting hooked.
Well said.
When I was probably 15 years old, I left the Catholic Church for good reason. And I never thought I would return. And then when my kids were little, I thought I should probably look for something. So I came to UU for a little while and then really enjoyed it. And in the past few years have come back. What I like about it is that it's a journey. It's not a dictated doctrine. I just feel like nobody claims to have the answers. It's a journey, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, we had nothing to offer, and it turns out nothing is just what a lot of people want.
Can I?
Barbara.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Sure.
Hear you.
Yes or no?
Yes.
Oh, okay, good. I know you heard me when I didn't want you to hear me. Is that true? Sorry.
Yeah.
Hey, Linda and Ron, it is so good to see you. And Linda, you know that we were hitting that tennis ball for a lot of years. And we had many opportunities that we spoke about the Unitarians in Sheridan. And I kept saying, I know them. And I kept thinking, I have so much respect for the people who already were the founding members of this fellowship. And I am so happy that I did my leap of faith, but it did take me a very long time. So my friend Holly Hogarty jumped on board before I did. But I have another friend that's participating today, and that is Linda Lawrence from Buffalo. So welcome, Linda, and we'll look forward to the day we can greet you in person. So thanks for being with us, and Victor, thank you, for getting Linda online with us. She told me she enjoyed it. So, okay, Smiths, keep coming back in and talking. We love to see your faces. We love to hear you. And this has really been one of my best decisions, and I'm really happy with what I've done. And going back to Claire Andrews passing away at the greenhouse, I am so happy that she had a peaceful, gentle death, and her family could be with her. And that's exactly what we want for all of us. So goodbye, everybody. And hey, I love your background. You too.
Thank you.
Where are
I have to hike up there this morning, but we got there.
Yeah, I want to visit.
Yeah,
this is fun.
that's a little
Thank
chilly
you,
out there,
everybody.
but
Well, Barbara,
Bye,
I want
everybody. Thank you. And if
Yeah.
I unmute myself, I guess.
we rejoiced when you came over to the dark side.
Yeah, as I said in an email to Barbara, the Catholic Church's loss is our gain.
Yeah. Well, thank you everybody for
I've got just a
your,
quick word.
oh, please, Cal, yeah.
Yeah, just wanted to say thanks and add to what others said. It was a great presentation. Just really what I needed. Really brought back great memories from for me in a lot of ways, and just really completed my return to Sheridan. And when I finally connected as a newbie in the basement of that building over by the fire station, that was really great, and still is. And it's really so good to see you and to see everyone. And I noticed our outstanding participation today too. So thank you so very much.
Thank you, Cal.
All right. So we'll extinguish our beautiful chalice, which is melted all over, but that looks kind of cool. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks, Ron and Linda.
Bye-bye.
We've blown out birthday candles. All right, you guys. Oh, stick around for tea and coffee with Sue if you so desire. And Ramona. All right, bye, guys. Thank you.
We forget to announce sometimes.
Hey, Victor,
Oh,
Yeah.
go ahead.
go ahead, Sue, sorry.
Just to